What's up everyone, it's Austin here from Make Pop Music and Austin Hall Audio, and today we are back with another video for you all. However, for today's video, we do have a little bit of a change of pace. As some of you might have seen on our Instagram, my computer did die last week, which is always annoying and a little bit unfortunate. However, I didn't lose any main files, I didn't lose any sessions, so we came out on top, it's all good. But with that said, I do have a new rig that's being installed right now, which means that we can't hop into Cubase and actually do a production tutorial today. However, I don't want to let that stop us from giving you guys some good content, so today I figured we could transition and do a more business and advice-oriented video. So in today's video, I want to talk about my 5 biggest essential tips for becoming a full-time producer. These are going to be tips that I've just kind of picked up over the years as I've transitioned into being a full-time producer. They're tips that I've seen a lot of my friends and peers implement, and these are things that no matter what journey you have, whether that's being a freelancer or working at a studio as a runner or going to college, these are 5 essential tips that I feel like no matter what field you're going to work in, no matter how you're going to get there or what kind of style you're going to work in, still apply no matter what. With that said, I am just speaking from mine and my peers' experience, so if you have any more tips or any questions or anything, leave a comment down below and I'll try to answer as much of that as possible. But just remember, these are general tips. This is not gospel. This is not the only way to make a full-time living as a producer or mixing engineer or songwriter. With that said, let's hop into tip number 1. This is going to seem basic and it's going to seem a little bit boring, but I promise you it's something that most people overlook. And tip number 1 is develop your skill as a producer. There are so many people that I see trying to just skip a bunch of steps and immediately get paying projects and build a website and, you know, become a full-time producer, and they haven't really developed their skills as a producer. They wouldn't be able to fully service any project that would come in. If an artist has a request, as a producer, you need to be able to facilitate that. So, you know, you really do need to kind of develop your skills and develop your sound and develop your knowledge of using your DAW and getting around problems and finding solutions. These are things that really do just take a bunch of time and trial and error, and it's a step that I see so many people kind of overlooking because they're so obsessed with the idea of turning their production into a business. As some of you may or may not know, I started production just to make demos for my band. I fell in love with the production process, made a ton of music for myself, and did that for years before I ever made a single dollar on production. I just did it because I genuinely loved it. I genuinely loved being able to make songs that I could hear back and play for myself. I loved being able to produce demos with my band, and I just really did fall in love with the process, and I was never focused on it becoming a career or making a YouTube channel or doing any of the stuff I'm doing now. That just all kind of naturally happened over time because I fell in love with something, had a passion, had an obsession, and then eventually got good enough where people just started offering to bring me in on their projects. So we'll dive into that a little bit later. But I did just want to go ahead and say for tip number 1, spend your time, put in your time and put in your work and actually develop your skills as a producer. There is no rush to turning this into a job or turning this into a paid hobby. This literally should just be a passion for all of you, whether you've just started or whether you've been doing this for 20 years. If you're not passionate about it, if you're not focused on the actual production at hand first, you're wasting everybody's time. Let's move on to step number 2, and that is develop a solid portfolio. So this kind of goes hand in hand with developing your skills. However, some people have developed their skills, and I'll hear people send me stuff that sounds really, really good, but they're trying to get paid projects or they're trying to get more paid projects, and I ask to actually hear their reel or their full portfolio or their website or something like that, and they don't really have it. They'll just have a bunch of kind of work in progresses or unreleased demos. And while that's good and that shows that you have a lot of skill, that doesn't put a lot of confidence into an artist or a client that's thinking about hiring you for their song. So one thing that I would advise is actually put together a portfolio of finished, released, mastered songs that are out in the world that people can listen to, get feedback on. You can show who's listening to it. You can say, yeah, I did this song, it's got 1,000 listeners, or I did this song, it's got 1,000,000 listeners. It doesn't have to be 1,000,000 or even 1,000, but just to show that you can actually see a project all the way through and get something from being a demo that the artist or you kind of worked on in its early stages all the way up to a fully released final project is huge, and it's something that I see a lot of people actually overlooking. One tip that I like to give to producers when they ask how to actually develop a portfolio of releases is that when you're getting started, nobody likes to do free work. Nobody likes to give into every collabro DM that they get. However, as a developing producer, one thing that I think is really, really crucial is find an artist that's small, they're starting out, that you really, really like, you think they're talented, you believe in them, and just reach out to them and see if they're down to work together. It's something that I did when I was transitioning into pop. There's no way I was gonna go get somebody to give me $500 or $1,000 or $3,000 to make a song because I had never proved myself. So instead what I did is I worked on a bunch of music for myself and released a couple songs. I met my friend Grayson at Barnes & Noble. We were working together. He wanted to be a pop artist, so I invited him over. We ordered a pizza, made a bunch of music for him, and I just did that with a few people, and eventually, when I had no songs, I just had a bunch of work in progress demos. You know, 3 or 4 months later, I was able to actually put a site together where I had 7 or 8 full releases that were mixed, they were put out into the world, and I was able to show people, yes, this is what we can do for your song or for your project. It's one of those things where even though you're not making money, you have to consider your time as an investment for building your own portfolio for yourself and really proving your worth to people that could potentially be paying you or trusting you with their art or their money in the future. So definitely put a little bit of time into developing a portfolio of actual releases that are out into the world, because that's something that so many people just skip and feel like if they just show work in progresses or demos, they can convince people to actually trust them with an official release. And typically it's just not gonna happen. Let's go into tip number 3, and this tip is actually not about music at all. This is just build your charisma, be a good person, and be a solid hang in the studio. So one thing that I think is huge for being a full-time producer is being able to make connections. It's being likable, it's having good conversation, being good at communication. When you're in a session, having good energy and facilitating creativity from the artist or the band, being able to run a session. It really is just about building that charisma and that confidence to be a likable, professional person that people want to be around, they want to trust with their music, and they want to trust with their money. Building your communication to where you can communicate with an artist and facilitate a good kind of process for them is huge. Building your vibe to where when you're in the studio, you have a good energy and you can facilitate the song at hand and you can conform to whatever artist is in your studio is huge. Because at the end of the day, we are making music, but as a producer, our main job is customer service and communication. We are trying to get the artist's idea into a tangible song that they can release. And some artists have a small idea of what they want. Some artists know exactly what they want. Our job as a producer is to just kind of inch that out of them and get that into a song that the world can hear. And that really only happens when you're trustworthy, you're likable, you have a good vibe. It's really, really important to be able to make connections. So a lot of times I hear people that are just immensely talented, but they just don't really have the people skills yet. They're not great at communicating. They are not great at responding to messages. They're not great at facilitating a vibe or kind of understanding what a client or an artist wants. And it's one of those things that is tough to work on, but if you can just work on kind of how you are with communication and how you are in the session or how you facilitate a project working remotely, that is literally 90% of the battle, because the song, as long as you've developed your skills already, will come out solid. At the end of the day, as a producer, you just want to be a person that the artist can rely on, a person that the artist likes and enjoys being around, and a person that they like working with because they are trusting you with their art. And if you're turning this into a full-time job, they are also trusting you with their money. So definitely develop those people skills, because that is key to running a business. All right, let's talk about tip number 4, and this is do your best work every time. As some of you may or may not know, returning clients are the lifeblood of running a full-time, especially freelance production business. It is much easier to work with an artist once and then have them come back and keep working on tons of projects rather than always working with somebody for the first time. It takes a ton of energy to find new artists. It takes a ton of energy to kind of develop that initial relationship and communication. So if you can find a team of 10 or 15 or 20 artists that trust you with their songs, they trust you with their releases, and they're always coming back for more stuff, that to me is really the key to success. It's going to cut down the actual effort that it takes to find a lead and turn that into a paying project. It really is just so much easier to have a project that you're consistently working on. And that really does only happen when you do your best work every time. So if you do get the privilege and the opportunity to be paid for a project, really put 110% effort in, because if the project comes out great, the artist feels like the process was really easy, they like the way that the song came out, they kind of had a good communication and understanding with you, it's not hard for them to make the decision to work with you again. And that truly is the biggest thing that you could ever have as a freelancing full-time producer. Just knowing that you have a handful of artists that you can constantly reach out to and see if they want to work on stuff or kind of see what the vibe is at the moment is just so much easier than always needing to find new work. So especially when you're getting started, make sure that you're crushing the project every time so you can get those returning clients and you can build long-term relationships with artists, because that to me is the actual key goal of what you should be doing as a producer, rather than just working with a million people all the time. It just takes so much energy and you're not able to fully focus on every artist. And I think that just literally take the time, do your best work, and have a small circle. Let's talk about the last tip. This is tip number 5, and this is have a plan and a backup plan. So one thing that I hear a lot of people when they're asking me to go full-time say is that they don't really have a full plan of how they're going to do it. They don't know how much income they need a month. They don't know how many projects they would need to meet that income. They don't know what rates they should have. They don't know where they're going to find artists to work with. They don't really know the process of kind of building a relationship and working through a project. And these are things that you really do have to learn and kind of put in place before you're trying to make this a job. I think figuring out exactly what your rate is going to be, how many projects you can work on at one given time, how easy it is to find a new artist to work with. Those are all things that you really should determine before you think, okay, I can make this a full-time career, because there's a lot of pressure that comes with making production an actual business. It's not just a hobby anymore. It's not just art anymore. It is business. It is customer service. It is figuring out how to send invoices and pay your bills. So I think having those actual plans and structures in place is huge. We do have a free resource that we've given away before. I'll link it down below. It's called the Fundamentals of Freelance. It's just a free PDF. You can literally just download it below. It talks about creating contracts, handling like sales calls. It talks about the structure of walking through a project. These are things that you do need to experiment with before you decide, oh, I want to make this an entire career. So maybe be a hobbyist. It just takes one project every now and then, kind of develop your sea legs, and then, you know, once you're ready, you can actually turn that into a business. I think that in addition to having the actual plan as a producer or a mixing engineer or a songwriter, I think just as important to that is having a backup plan, and that doesn't have to necessarily be having a part-time job, but that could be one kind of aspect. It's just having multiple streams of income. So if your production's slow one month or your songwriting is slow, you're not scraping and working with every person out of desperation that you possibly can. You're able to still focus on your long-term goals instead of kind of compromising on those things. So, you know, like when I was starting, I was producing, I was mixing, I was doing some songwriting, I was making like stage intros for bands, I was doing graphic design, I was working in a ton of different genres, and I was just kind of trying everything and seeing what stuck. And it made it a lot easier because instead of me having to make $50,000 with just producing pop artists, I was like, okay, well, all I have to do is make $50,000 doing graphic design and website design and production and mixing. And it's so much easier to find a couple different people in each of those brackets to pay your bills at first, rather than it is to really try to niche down. So I'm a fan of eventually niching down and finding your market and finding your vibe as a producer or as a service provider. But to get started, have a plan of all of these different income streams, whether that's investing or having a part-time job or doing multiple things as a freelancer. It's just really important to not put all of your eggs in one basket, especially when you're first getting started. I think that having that plan and that backup plan in place really just buys you a little bit of security and confidence as a producer, and it kind of cuts down on the desperation and the immediate questioning of what am I doing if, you know, projects slow down or if you have an invoice that's not paid yet. I think that the least amount of pressure you can put on yourself to kind of create the actual income, the better work you're going to do and the easier it is to actually make the money that you need to make to be a full-time producer. With that said, that's pretty much the 5 tips that I want to talk about in this video. Of course, I could dive into each one a lot more, so if you have any questions or you want any additional information or anything like that, let us know in the comments down below. Again, not everybody is going to have the privilege to be a full-time producer or do music as a living, but if you are and you do have any tips that you could actually share your tips below, because I know everybody's got a different experience. But that's going to do it for this video. Other than that, hopefully we'll be back next week in the actual DAW so we can give you guys more production videos. But that's going to do it for this one. If you like this video, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. And other than that, we'll see you guys next week. Much love, everyone. Peace.